Today we're going to be discussing investment in new energy. Now this year, 2018, it does feel like there's momentum building and the pace of investment into this space is certainly ramping up, hence the topic of this webinar. So if we move on to the meat of the webinar, and we'll introduce ourselves first. This work is coming from, as I said, our new energy business model team here at Delta EE. So that is myself, my colleague Neil.
Hello, everyone.
And Charmaine is dialing in from Bath.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
Fantastic. So you can also see just a quick reminder that we do a series of webinars over the year coming from our different research services and the consulting work that we do. So lots of interesting topics to dial into and gen up on and find out about all the exciting work that we're doing.
Yeah, and if you'd like more information about the work that we do on new energy business models, feel free to get in touch with us, have a look at our website, or follow any of us on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to have a bit of an intro for me. Thanks again for joining. This is the agenda for today's webinar. We'll do a quick introduction to Delta Energy, so we'll make it quite short because there are quite a few of you guys who are familiar with what we do, but the reason why we'll do that is to introduce the business models research that we do, which really helps to set why we do this research and put it in context. Moving on from that, we're going to outline 5 key hot topics or areas of investment that we've seen in our research. We'll then zoom in on 2 very specific examples from that, electric vehicles and energy services. And then we'll go on to the who, so outlining 6 key groups of organisations that we've looked into and highlight 1 specific example profile which covers their specific investments in new energy. And then we'll wrap up with a bit of thinking from the team here about what this means for the energy transition in general, why it matters, and then there'll be an opportunity to ask any questions towards the end. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping on the next slide, so bear with me on that. So for those of you guys who are familiar with this software, you probably know where all this organisation is, but if you've got any questions throughout the webinar, just type them in the box at the bottom, which is helpfully called questions. There's also a chat function where you can raise hand or ask any issues. What I will do is keep an eye on that, and if we can answer the questions as we go through that, we will do. If not, we'll address them towards the end, and if we run out of time towards the end, we'll follow up by email. There's a couple of, the technical stuff should all work out fine, but if you do have any questions or queries, just give us a buzz through that, the software. Super. Okay, so as Delta Energy Environment, our key function as an organisation is to help companies transition from old energy to new energy. And for us, new energy is around distributed, low carbon, customer centric parts of the energy system. So we really focus on the customer end, and I think the key difference between us and many other research providers are we really ground our research in primary insight. So talking to the companies, working very closely with our clients to understand what their key challenges are and what the system looks like globally. So we work with some of the key names in Europe, but also worldwide. Specifically, one of the core areas that we focus on in the new energy business models service is really looking at the way business models and propositions are put together. But we draw on 4 kind of key hubs of research within the rest of our business. So heat, digitalization, distributed generation and flexibility, and electric vehicles and the intersection with electricity. And the reason why I mention this is a lot of the examples we'll talk about come from across those different clusters of research and parts of the energy system. But the key important thing for us to bring out here is that this gives us real depth with what we're talking about. So it's not just a question of a month or 2 months worth of research. We also have a consulting service where we draw a lot of insight from as well.
Thank you, Charmaine. So to introduce, and I think just take a moment here to look at the 6-pillar framework that we've developed for our new energy business model service. So that dedicated research service that we just saw in the previous slide. We've developed this by looking across hundreds of different concepts and business models across the market, changing so quickly. So we're definitely kept on our toes, and sometimes it makes our head hurt, but it's definitely really fun. So we've drawn on all this expertise and identified, drilling down into the core of how is value generated through these new energy propositions. And you can see on the screen here the 6 key categories. So starting at the top left, for time of use optimization, value in the future is not going to be about the amount of energy that's used or produced. It's going to be about timing. So these propositions describe businesses that optimize or help customers to optimize the timing of their energy consumption, their generation, or indeed their storage. Lifestyle products. This describes businesses that are engaging with customers who want peace of mind, or they want to have fun, they want to connect emotionally with brands. This is very difficult from your typical energy dynamics that we see in the market today. But it's really about offering customers these products and services that meet these needs in this lifestyle products type of way. And then one of the interesting kind of core next steps is really using that insight that's generated to then design these more complex energy propositions. Marketplace operations, so the bottom left. This category is describing business models that are enabling customers to either buy from each other or use third-party intermediaries. So it's not your traditional energy stakeholders or supplier. And here you want to be owning or securing a stake in these different marketplaces, getting into more value streams and broadening your focus out beyond just commodity. Efficient consumption. Here, businesses are helping customers quite, as it sort of says in the title, to use less energy, but they're making money from doing this. Energy as a service, one of the kind of key goals for a lot of companies that we're seeing. This is addressing customers and providing them with actually meeting their needs in terms of they actually want light or heat or cooling rather than the commodity. So sell them these services. And this locks in the customer. It helps them to create these new value streams that are around, for example, financing or servicing and so on. And then finally, bundling. This is about applying the concept of bundling. So combining energy with, for example, other home energy services. Again, locking in the customer, reducing your cost to serve, and making margins on these other home services. So here, I've described the 6 different ways that we see money being generated in new energy and the process of transitioning a business model. We have actually webinars on each of these 6 that go into much more detail. So feel free to check out our website and have a look at those. But as you know, here today, we are focusing on investment in new energy. So this next slide, it shows us 5 key ways in which you can approach developing a different business model. And these clearly, they vary from different individual companies, and they'll vary over time as well. They can work independently of each other or in combination. But today we're looking at this left-hand side of the spectrum, so specifically at equity investment. Who and how much money is being channeled into new energy. It's not to say that the other approaches are any less important. In fact, we're seeing really interesting steps being made here by a variety of different companies, but we've only got 45 minutes today, so we're going to focus on recent investment activity. And the key point here is really to emphasize that this type of approach allows a company to quickly gain the capabilities or technologies, for example, that they can build into their core business, or to quickly reach a new market or customer base. So enabling you to contribute to the ability to rapidly change your business model. So let's now launch our first poll, just to get a quick bit of engagement from the audience. those of you who have dialed into previous Delta webinars, you know our keenness for this, and we always have good feedback actually from the audience who enjoy taking part in these. So the first poll I will just launch on the software now. That should show up on your screens. As you can see, it's asking, which technologies do you see as being most important for investment? And we've got 5 different options. So we've got software and data analytics for new services. So for example, a virtual power plant. We've got, actually, is it most important to improve your existing operations? Is it really important to create a field force and really invest in an installation service capability? Is it more around products and the hardware, so EVs, batteries, connected and smart home? Or is it about renewable generation assets? So we can see that nearly half of the attendees have voted. Do rest assured, these results are anonymous. We don't publish who selects what. But we will show you the results of the poll in an aggregated way. So I can close that in, say, 15 seconds or so, just when the last few of you have selected. But it does look like we have got one clear winner actually, which has got currently 50% of the voting, and that's really interesting. The one that's been selected. So if I let the last 20% or so of you cast your votes, and then we'll share those results with you. Okay, so shall I do a countdown? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, that is closed now, and I'll just share the results with you. Charmaine, can you see that?
Yeah, I can see that. It's really interesting, actually. So a clear winner is around innovative products. So hopefully you guys haven't been too swayed by the fact that we put EVs as an option in there. But really interesting. I would say that we see a lot of different feedback actually from our clients and from the market. Broadly, I think the 2 top options would align. But yeah, interesting, really interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for taking part in that. So I will now skip to sharing some of our analysis with you and going into a deep dive on a couple of different topics.
Yeah, so we kind of had a reason for asking you that poll. When we did this piece of research, which, you know, as I said before, we looked at some key investor groups or types of organisations. We profiled a number and we drew across all of our research that we've been doing specifically on the business model service for the past 18 months, but also in Delta's other work. And we identified 5 key areas of investments that have been emerging recently. So the first one is what we've termed smart everything. And I think this really draws on, as we see also in the poll, wider trends towards connectivity, which might be within the energy sector, but it might go beyond, focusing on smart devices, smart software, propositions, everything that you could think of as smart. And that's not just around smart meters anymore. It goes far beyond that. So a really good example, which is quite famous, is Google and their Nest device, which they acquired. It really kind of taps into this idea that it's not just about energy or meters or a single device, but it's about all your devices and your vehicles and your home and the buildings, and it creates this huge mass of data which needs to be processed, but is a real kind of focus of investment. So the second one we've identified, and one that we'll go into a bit more detail, is around energy services, which on the poll was not necessarily the most popular area for investment, but that's interesting. And what we're talking about here is the generic term for services beyond the commodity. So one example might be insurance services, and there's some really great examples of innovation in France. NG Home Services is a really good example of that. It could be looking at field forces. So in the UK and beyond, a company called HomeServe, who are franchising there and partnering to expand their business, is another good example. When we talk about time of use optimization, now you'll notice that these 5 topics don't broadly map to our 6 categories, but time of use optimization did emerge as a very key key focus area. So this could be from investing or acquiring some sort of aggregation or virtual power plants platform, or it could be simply investing in devices that are capable of sending price signals to energy users to prompt them to change their energy behavior, or it could be companies looking at vehicle to grid capabilities, for example. The fourth area is what we've termed novel technologies, and I think for us this is a real kind of typical R&D spend, but actually with the reason why we've included it is it's very early stage, the newest technologies that will transform the industry, and we are seeing investment into this at the early stage, things that would be considered moonshot or very, very future thinking. And this is interesting because we're talking about an industry that's quite mature, the energy industry, and they're really looking way, way, way into the future. So investments that are speculative and potentially quite risky. And the fifth topic, which Jenny will go into a bit more detail, is around EVs. So this is a hot topic, particularly this year, I would say. It's attracting all sorts and sizes of interest and investment across the market. I'm not going to talk about it too much because we'll come back to it in some detail. But overall, I think across these 5 areas, there's a spectrum of the size of investment. Some are very large and very serious, and some are much more hedging interests, which comes across as a wait and see approach. I'll talk about, if I go on to the next slide, one of the 2 topics we'll talk about today is energy services, and I think it's a very broad topic. So we mean this beyond the commodity capability for energy suppliers or energy solutions providers, and this is really focusing on in-home or within buildings in the commercial sector. So moving beyond the commodity has long been an established trend or an established, I suppose, goal for most companies within the energy sector, but is a concept that works for any business. So if you're not a supplier, you can move into energy services without having to go through the regulation that is involved. And it's so, as a result, it's very variable and very wide. From one end, you might have insurance for boilers. To the other end, you could have off-grid solar services in rural parts of Kenya. So it's very, very large scope, and so there's lots of different kind of capabilities you can develop in this sector. So I'll go through 2 examples we have on companies investing in this area. So the first one is OVO Energy, and I think we have some of the OVO guys on the line, so I'm going to give those guys a little wave. And OVO, for those of you who are not familiar, are a UK challenger supplier. So they started up around 10 years ago. They were really part of the second wave of new suppliers challenging the largest suppliers in the UK. Their proposition as an energy company was around technology first, and they grew very rapidly with some very, very low price tariffs in the market. Their acquisition story only really started in around 2017, so fairly recently and fairly late in their business life cycle. So in 2017, they acquired VCharge, which, for those of you not familiar, really specialise in residential flexibility from electric heating primarily, and then subsequently electric vehicles. They then, in the same year, acquired Corgi Home Plan, which in the UK is one of the top 3 home services providers. So they have a real installation and field force, commonly associated with gas heating in the UK, actually. They then took a stake in a company called Hybrid Energy, which looks at EV charge points. And they've announced more EV partnerships, more propositions on storage. They also have broadband insurance offerings and a smart meter rollout plan. They've also announced pilots around V2G and residential demand response, which the UK government is encouraging through a number of different innovation funding streams. So there's a really clear picture that starts to emerge that they have made very specific tailored acquisitions which all centre around residential energy services. They don't appear to be after C&I, but they're very, very focused in the residential space. So that's one of the examples we looked at, very interesting. We have a profile on that in the research that we've just done. The second example is really quite different to the OVO example. So SMA, so for those of you not familiar with SMA, they are the leading German inverter manufacturer. So they make inverters for solar PV installations. They've always been considered a premium brand, so higher end, but very, very good quality. A couple of years ago, they recognised that the solar market would continue, but that it was changing. So the investment in solar was changing. And they recognised that they also had access to data stored on their inverters from lots and lots of distributed energy assets. So within their inverters, they provide a software platform. So what they realised is if they could take this data and do something with it, they could offer services which meant that they were less relying on their inverter products as their main form of revenue. They've acquired some smaller manufacturers and some small competitors in the manufacturing space, but with those and with this understanding of the data capabilities that they had, they launched a new brand which they called Coneva. And so the tagline to Coneva is connected energy value. And it really focuses on energy management optimization for anyone with any sort of solar. So for businesses or residential, it's a real interesting specific targeting of energy management, whether existing assets, and quite different to companies going into the market.
Fantastic. Okay, so that is having a look at one of those 5 new energy investment hotspots. Charmaine, I'll now go on to the second.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So the second one we were going to discuss today with you is electric vehicles. And in fact, yeah, so as we mentioned, it's the latest one of our new dedicated research services. So as Charmaine said, we are seeing lots of attention on this. To get the key message out there straight away, the size of the opportunity within and around this essentially new global industry, we're seeing that as this race is very much on right now, and it's being reflected in the investment activity that we're seeing. So you're seeing investments of all sorts of different sizes, and from all sorts of different companies. So for example, your smaller innovative suppliers, like OVO, taking the example before, taking stakes in 2 EV specialists, so the Hybrid Energy Solutions and Indra Renewable Technologies, then beginning a major V2G project with Nissan. So examples of smaller innovative companies, also examples from larger established players. So for example, NG, they have acquired EV Box, which has over 4,000 charging stations, or NLX in Italy. They have bought eMotionwerk. So these are a provider that's focused on monetizing the demand flexibility from EVs. But one of the biggest trends that we're seeing is the increasing presence of oil majors. So we've just mentioned 3 on the slide here and the investments that they're making. But I quite like this quote here that we've got. So if the smart home is the gateway for new energy digital giants such as Google and Amazon, which I think is a fairly established and accepted trend, then we see the EV as the gateway to new energy for oil majors. As I'm sure a variety of you are already aware, these 3 different major players that are listed on the screen have made these investments into these EV infrastructure players. So we've got Shell. They invest in a huge range of different energy businesses, but increasingly they're looking at innovative new energy startups. And as Charmaine said at the beginning, by new energy, we mean customer focused, downstream, increasingly service-based propositions that are connected and that are online. So they bought New Motion, who are a leading electric vehicle charge point provider across Europe, in October 2017, so pretty much a year to today. And it's interesting to look at them though, and this acquisition in conjunction with some of the other work that they've done, or some of the other moves that they've done. So for example, in Sonnen in Germany, it's an interesting, previously manufacturer, but moved into the supply space for energy. They've got a very interesting transition that they've been through, or the investment in First Utility. So could we be seeing a creation of a new joined up EV business model in time? Because we are seeing increasing attention on sector coupling. So for example, or essentially bringing together this transport piece, this electric piece, and then even this heat piece. So while some of the investments here, they probably can be categorized as fairly exploratory in nature at the moment, what is clear is the ambition to explore maybe a possible new generation to retail delivery model that potentially is kind of akin to Shell's legacy drilling to pump business. Similarly, Equinor, so this is the company that was formerly Statoil. They established a legacy VC business back just before 2000, and that was really focusing on upstream technologies. But more recently, in 2016, they established a second VC fund that was focusing on renewables and low carbon solutions. Now, while this is still primarily focused on generation and infrastructure, as opposed to this downstream customer focus, they have made an investment which fits into this category here as of ChargePoint. So they're a major Californian EV infrastructure developer. And you can see that their ambitions in new energy most likely represent a starting point for this huge company, this multinational oil and gas giant. So perhaps we'll see some of this innovation coming through. But it will be interesting to understand whether this more customer behind the meter focus, is it a stretch too far, or will we see some really interesting points coming through here? And then most recently we have of course had BP and their acquisition of ChargeMaster, so the UK's largest electric vehicle charging company. These different types of propositions, we're seeing these developing from these different players, and I think one of the most interesting questions will be whether we see a direct customer facing route that's taken, so a B2C approach, or is it more likely that we'll see a B2B2C going forward? So that's something that we'll be looking out for. But clearly there is an aim to protect and monetize their existing fuel retailing assets through the development of this EV charging activity. And again, another one of the kind of questions we'll be asking ourselves and having more of a detailed think about is whether they can build the scale that they desire without becoming, say, for significant players in the home charging space, which we haven't yet seen significant moves in. So we're seeing here a range of different players active in EVs, all working out what opportunities they can exploit, when, how best, with whom, which actually was the focus and the topic of one of our latest pieces of research, a viewpoint that we did on the service, so having a look at those different opportunities and options at a broader scale. But that gives you a feel for some of the investment activity that's happening in these two hotspots of new energy investment. I'm now going to pass over to my colleague Neil, and he's going to introduce these 6 different types of companies that we looked at through this research.
Perfect, thank you, Jenny. Yes, as you said, as part of our research, we identified 6 key groups of companies investing in the new energy space, and those can broadly be split into 2. So there's the traditional energy-focused players. So this includes your energy suppliers, oil majors, as we've talked about, and manufacturers as well. But there's also players which we're seeing enter the market which are really brand new to the energy space. So there's technology giants. I'd say Google's parent company Alphabet is a good example of one of these. Consumer non-energy companies as well, like telecoms and internet providers. And there's also lots of entrepreneurial startups joining in as well. So these are ambitious young companies looking to really rapidly grow their market share. Now, we've completed in-depth profiles of 10 examples of these companies, and in a moment I'm going to talk you through one example of those. But before we do that, we're really keen to hear what you think about this subject. So we're going to have our second poll of the morning.
Thank you very much, Neil. So I'll use the software to launch that now. I just need to select that, and then this should show up on your screens. So again, the same principles that applied before. Please select one of the options. Again, there's 5 to choose from. Which market players do you see as making the most promising investments? So we've got energy suppliers and networks. We've got tech or software giants, commonly known as the GAFAs. So your Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. Or will it be oil majors? Will it be manufacturers? Or will it be telcos coming from outside of energy, increasingly entering this space? So again, we nearly got 50% of people voted. Oh, no, it's just jumped up as well. So people are making their minds up, casting those votes. Fantastic. This one is less of a clear split between the different options. There's a bit more of a challenge, or kind of a close cut call. So if the last couple of you can cast your votes, that would be really useful. And we'll close the poll in about 10 seconds. Okie doke. All right, and I'm just going to close that now, and then again we will share the results with you. Fantastic. So just to double check that you can see those.
Yeah, we can see those. They're really interesting.
So we've got the tech software giants, which actually is really interesting. Just on Monday, so we've got something called Delta discussions that we host internally to discuss and kind of collate our thoughts on some of these key questions that we're hearing from our clients, these key dynamics, these key movements. And just on Monday, we were discussing the potential impact, or infiltration is the word that we used, from GAFA into energy and new energy. And we were looking at, do we think they're going to be active and becoming core providers of energy services that we know now, so even moving into supply? Or do we think that they will primarily focus on this new energy space with regards to surrounding services that come around energy or the home? So it's really interesting to see, and a nice confirmation that out there in the industry, you're also asking yourselves similar questions and seeing these players as particularly threatening or challenging. So thanks for sharing your views with us. I'll hide that poll now, and we'll move on to the profile that Neil mentioned with regards to one of the companies that we looked at in detail.
Perfect. Yeah. So
can I just double check? It looks like on the audience view, sorry to interrupt, Neil, that the poll is still showing. Charmaine, can you just confirm what you can see on the screen?
Yeah, it's still a poll.
Okay, that shouldn't be the case. I'm just going to hide it again. Yeah, okay, so hopefully that has now updated.
No.
Okay, this is slightly confusing because I have hidden it as it should have been. But I'm just going to stop sharing the screen and then start it again just to see if the software can catch up.
Yeah, so I'll carry on as Jenny has just fixed it. Perfect. Well done, Jenny. So I'll talk you through now one of the companies that we did profile in our report. And I think we felt that Centrica, as the UK's largest energy supplier and a company with really quite a bit of investment activity in recent times, were a good one to choose for this webinar. So Centrica's investment strategy has been to acquire and integrate companies that offer new technology and expertise, as well as provide them with access to new customers and markets. And like all energy suppliers, this is ultimately about them becoming less dependent on their core business by selling a wider range of energy-related but more customer-centric products and services. So to implement this strategy, Centrica has made some really quite major investments over the past 5 years or so. That's been with both residential and business customer segments in mind, and it's led the company into a number of different markets. So these have included, in the connected home space, the acquisition of AlertMe in 2015, who are an Internet of Things platform developer. This was to support the development of British Gas's Hive business by enabling them to extend its connected product ecosystem. Then in the energy services space, they've made a couple of major purchases. So Energy has provided Centrica with a major CHP solutions business, and NIAS, who were bought in 2016, expanded Centrica's capabilities and European footprint in the energy management market. Then the purchase of Restore, who are a major Belgian aggregator in 2017, was also highly notable, as it gave Centrica demand response capabilities across several different European markets. So to give you an idea of how much Centrica have been investing, the four companies I just mentioned came to a combined cost of around £415 million. And Centrica have also invested further elsewhere and internally, as you might expect. So, for example, a grand total of £500 million has been set aside by the company to develop their connected home business from 2015 to 2020. So really large sums. Then set against these larger acquisitions, investment in more speculative businesses has been actually relatively modest. Having said that, though, they did spend £13 million in 2016 to acquire Flowgem, who are a UK company developing Internet of Things technology to detect water leaks. So this was to complement their connected home and home services business. They've also launched a £100 million innovation fund, which was back in 2017, and that provides venture capital to startups with innovative technologies or business models. And so that's already seen investment in areas like electric vehicles, flexibility, and microgrids as well. Ultimately, then, we at Delta really see Centrica as a classic example of an energy company trying extremely hard to transform itself into a more customer-centric services business. It's going to be fascinating to watch one of Europe's major energy incumbents transform and adjust to the realities of this new energy world. And I think at present, Centrica's investment really looks quite bold, especially when viewed in the context of recent business performance. So, for example, the company's share price has been declining steadily from over £4 back in 2013 to actually just over £1.50 when I checked the other day. But what is really yet to be seen is whether these investments can help buck this trend by stemming their loss of customers or indeed replacing declining legacy income sources. And certainly at Delta and in the new business model service in particular, we're going to be tracking this with keen interest. So I'll now pass back to Charmaine, I think, to round things up before we then start answering some of your questions coming in.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. That's great. I think it's a really good point. I mean, Centrica are often used as an example, and we did think about using a different example, but actually they are such a great case study and such a clear example of how companies, suppliers in particular, are attempting this transition, and some of them quite boldly. So I think just to kind of round up, or kind of just to give a bit of our view on what might this point to. I mean, as we said at the beginning, there's such a variety of ways or tactics to develop capability in the new energy business models section, and we have focused on the invest and the acquisition piece of that. But what does all of these investment categories and hotspots mean? The size and the shape, what does it indicate? And I think, you know, we've come across 5 topics. We've looked at here in this webinar to specifically electric vehicles and energy services. And why have we looked at all of these topics? Well, we really take equity investment as a representation of commitment to the market. And that might sound quite obvious. If you put some money against something, it means you've got a level of commitment. But actually, I think we notice through this that market players are seeing the energy system transforming, and this is a quick way of getting involved. And then for everyone else who's watching and observing everyone from the sidelines or in the market, it's a really, really good way of seeing who is getting involved, how quickly they'll get involved, and how much they really care about it. And I think the other interesting thing that we've observed through this is how common it is to see people who are investing linking that investment to existing capabilities. So a great example is oil majors who are reimagining, as Jenny said, that drill to pump model that they know so well. So they're exceptionally good at taking technology and expanding it globally and extracting the best value at it. So it'd be really interesting, it will be really interesting to see if they can just swap in electricity system values or capabilities for that particular model. I mean, there's other examples of building on existing capabilities. Centrica is a great example of that, and really kind of defining which direction they're traveling. And investments give them a really good starting point for that.
Yeah. So I think one of the fundamental questions that we see everyone asking is, where does margin come from beyond commodity? That's the key question, the key kind of focus of this phrase moving towards new energy. And investment in this new energy space, as we've said, it quickly allows companies to gain these capabilities, to gain these expertise, gain these routes to market, options with their customers, as well as the technologies to do so, as we saw the importance of that in the poll earlier. And there's a belief in the industry that these services is a route to developing that customer relationship. And that's very different from the traditional activity that has dominated the energy space. And then secondly, offering an increasing variety of products. So again, just moving beyond just providing simple homogeneous kilowatt hours. So in other words, you're growing the breadth of your relationship with existing customers, and then you're also trying to gain new customers. So you're tapping into retention, you're also tapping into acquisition, as well as then trying to maximize the revenue that you generate from these new areas of activity. But it's obviously expensive and absolutely core. It needs integrated with the business that you currently operate, and then ultimately has to attract customers. So we're aware that we've only really managed to share a fairly, I think it's probably fair to say, a snippet really of the research that we've done. We had those 10 profiles that we looked at in detail, and the 5 different areas of investment. And this is just one of the reports that we've done in this area. So clearly there's lots happening. We're going to continue to keep looking at this, analysing the market activities and the trends and dynamics. So yeah, please do get in touch if you are interested. It's fantastic to see actually that all the attendees, it looks like, who started are still with us. Sometimes we have these webinars at Delta for 30 minutes, but actually I see now on the clock we've been talking at you for 45. So let's go to those questions and see if we can address some of those in the next 5 minutes or so. And then if we don't manage to get through all of them, though, we will have a look at them and follow up and contact you.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. So there's been a couple of questions, 1 or 2 which I've answered. So we will get in touch, and if anyone wants a slide pack, we'll be happy to send that over. Let me just pull up these questions. So one was from an audience member who, in reference to the oil giants, asked whether we think Shell has the advantage over BP and Equinor in the EV charging space because of the acquisition of First Utility. So I think my take on this, Jenny, Neil, pop in with your take, is that it really depends on which of the value chain you're targeting as the acquiring customer. So if Shell are really focused on becoming having that relationship with the end user, which they haven't historically, then of course having a direct route in via established energy supplier is a great tool in that. But if they're not, if where they see the value somewhere else, whether it's a bit further upstream or in the network, then it wouldn't be. So I suppose that's my take on it. Jenny, yeah. I don't know, you've done some research on this recently, so you might have stuff to add.
Yeah, it certainly echoes the question that we said. It will be interesting to see whether it will be a B2C or a B2B2C proposition that is favoured going forward. And I think it's clearly very accurate to note the difference between the strategies that we see or that we can infer from the investment so far anyway that Shell and BP have taken. I think it would be certainly sensible as well to look at your closest competitors and then potentially, as opposed to copying what they're doing, thinking about how you can take a different tact and moving that forward.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that point about capabilities and really understanding what your capabilities are and which ones you actually want to develop, and trying to not make those too big. Otherwise, it's the challenge is very, very, very large. A couple of other questions. One which was around regulation. So, do we track regulatory changes that allow business models to happen, and potentially what impact does that have on investment? So we do track regulations, not in detail. So we cover European focused, but we have a global outlook. So we are aware of the regulations, and obviously it's very key in many of the new energy business model space for us to be aware of that. We're not a regulations research service really, so it's the impact that those will have on new businesses. So we have a little bit, but we don't have deep expertise in that area. But it's obviously very important.
I was going to say, yeah. So we don't focus on the nitty gritty of certain regulations. What is really interesting about that question, though, kind of taking it out a broader sense, is so what allows these different business models, what enables these different business models. We've actually been working for the last 3 months, and when I say sometimes this work makes our head hurt, this last piece that we've been working on, as Neil and Charmaine I'm sure will agree, has been absolutely fascinating. We've essentially been asking ourselves, what are the key characteristics in the market and the key core company capabilities that need to be in place in order to succeed in providing these different business models? Yeah, I'm certain that we'll do another webinar on that, as the research that's coming out of that is really interesting.
Yeah, and I think exactly it's really useful for us to understand and understand that the questions we're asking ourselves in the research are the ones that people are asking in the market. So that's great. We've got a couple of other questions. Are we good for another one or two, Jenny? I think. Yeah,
we still got most of the people on the line. I mean, I appreciate if you need to log off, then that's absolutely fine. We will be following up with those who are interested with slides, and this recording will be made available. And you can email us as well.
Super. Okay, so there is a one about Centrica. So one for you, Neil, I think. Do we know, is Centrica investing in burning money to find the best value proposition? So to refine, I think, the value proposition. Or are they earning enough money? So are they getting a return on their significant investment?
I would have to say they are not currently earning a significant amount of money on their investments. This is very much Centrica at the stage of transforming their business towards a more services-focused business model. Their legacy income streams are certainly in decline, but yeah, we're certainly yet to see any evidence that they've been able to turn their investments into a profitable business model, and I think that's has been reflected over the past few years, as I said, in the decline in their share price, and they're no doubt under a lot of pressure from investors to demonstrate that these investments are going to return them to their old ways of providing a steady, sustainable dividend. So, yeah, in short answer to your question, I don't think we can say they're burning money, but I don't think they're earning a significant amount of money as yet. But we do think they're an excellent example of a company trying extremely hard to transition.
It's a really good question, isn't it? Because this new energy stuff is still really early. We're still really early in the journey.
Very exploratory. Looking at for example, if we continue on Centrica and their activity with Hive, so we've spoken to a variety of people in the investment space and stakeholders of different, for example, pension funds or investment houses, and there is a hesitation from investors, naturally enough, because they, and certainly on the long-term investment scene, against risk. And these investments are certainly not guaranteed, or specific companies acting in these different areas won't necessarily, it's difficult to tell who's going to be the winner. The activities themselves, though, and what they're trying to achieve, we have no doubt in our minds is the direction of travel that will enable companies to succeed in new energy. And lifestyle products, for example, such as Hive, we yet to figure out the best way to generate consistent revenue from customers with these propositions. But what they absolutely do is provide you with a huge amount of insight and data and understanding of your customers to enable you to develop a richer relationship with them, and then in time use that to design these more complex propositions.
Thanks, Jenny. I think we'll just look at the time. We'll probably finish up there. We will get round to answering any other questions we've got online over email or by phone. But just to say thanks everyone for joining. The slides are available. Either drop us a line or get in contact with us. We do have, as Jenny mentioned at the start, all of our webinars from earlier, both Delta and Business Model series, available online or on request. We also have a YouTube channel as well, so you can watch them back. But yeah, thanks. Any feedback you want to give us, or if you just want to get in touch, our contact details are on screen. Follow us on LinkedIn, follow Delta on LinkedIn, and get updates on future webinars coming up.
Great, thank you very much. Well, thanks very much for joining us this morning. I hope you've had fun.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, take care everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Cheers, bye.
Bye.